Okay, so as I was saying, we have other models of the 2000 series valves. The next normally closed valve we have is a 2230, and the 2230 is exactly what we just covered. All the internals are the same. The only difference is now we have a pressure regulator on the outside of the body of the valve. And again, make sure that you look at this arrow, this direction of flow arrow, because this is critical. Because again, you'll call me and say my valve's not working, and one of the first questions I will ask you, and it may be the first question, is how do you have the valve installed? And if you have a smartphone, I'll ask you to take a picture of it, and you could text it to me or send it on my email. And that's the first thing I look at. I ask you which way the direction of flow is coming in. So, and always when you're looking at these valves, like for instance the 2230, a 2250, 2160, 2260, and a 2265, we have a nipple on the downstream side of the valve, not on the upstream side of the valve. So the regulators are always going to be, if your flow direction is going this way, so this is always going to be in the lower left-hand corner of the valve. When you're standing on the front of the valve, you can tell very easily, do I have the valve installed properly? Okay. Now, on our pressure regulating valves, there's a couple things that I like to go over with you. Number one, when you want to turn the valve on manually, on the regulator on a 2230, we have this stainless steel stem T-handle. And you don't have to turn it very much, maybe a couple turns. Make sure that you have enough room in your valve box. And that's to open up your valve manually. Now, a lot of people, what they'll try to do is they'll open this up and try to adjust their downstream pressure. You can't do this with the internal bleed. You have to turn it on electrically through the solenoid through your controller. If you try to adjust your pressure regulator with just the valve open manually, it won't work. Because when we do it manually, we actually bypass the regulation inside the valve. So they also come standard with our low power solenoid. Now you can put on our copper solenoid if you want, which is this model is a 4333 solenoid. That's the model number for it. But they come standard with our low power solenoid. You have a copper tube that comes up from the block assembly of the valve to the bonnet area. If you ever are taking this apart, make sure you put these in correctly and not try to cross thread them. If you do cross thread it, you're going to have to order this tube. Okay. Also on the pressure regulator, you have a Schrader valve, and it's on the downstream side. So all you have to do is take the cap off, and you can put your pressure gauge here. And I highly recommend that you use a pressure gauge when you're adjusting your pressure regulator. That's what it's there for. Don't try to eyeball it, because if the plans say 65 psi of downstream pressure, the gauge you can adjust it, and the gauge will be a lot more accurate than try to eyeball it or trying to go to your risers and stand on them up and down. I see a lot of contractors do that. It doesn't work. Okay. How do I adjust my pressure regulator? First thing, you got to turn it on electrically. Then you have a set screw right here. What you do is you unloosen this set screw, and then if you want to increase your pressure, let's say that your gauge says 40 psi and you want 65 psi, you'll crank this down. Now, we don't preset any of our regulators. We have no idea what your pressure is on that particular job that you ordered the valves for. So you have to do this in the field to get your desired pressure range. So if we want to increase your pressure, you screw it down. Now let's say it's reading, for some reason, it's reading 80 psi and you only need 65. You then would go the opposite way, counterclockwise up. And that would, again, you can dial in based on what your what your gauge says on your pressure regulator. Now the gauges are available. Usually you can get them either with glycerin or without a glycerin filled gauge. I like the glycerin filled. They're a little bit more accurate. They come with a tube, and then you have the Schrader adapter that you on there. Some of the wholesalers still sell them. You're going to have to call your wholesaler or distributor who you buy from and ask them if they carry pressure gauges, or they can get them for you. There's a couple companies that deal online. Some of those guys are selling the pressure regulators, the pressure gauge with the tube and the Schrader valve adapter on there. If you need to get into the pressure regulator to repair it, we now have an access through the bottom of the regulator, and you can do this in the valve if you want. It's pretty simple to do. What you would have to do is obviously turn off your water, make sure you don't have any water going through the system, and you can undo these two nuts right here, pull the tube off, and then you could take some vice grips and actually flip this over, okay, in the valve box. Make sure that if you have dirt underneath this, you're going to have to get that dirt or mud or rock, whatever you have underneath it, out of the way so this will flip over. Once you do flip it over, then you can just unscrew this, and there is a metering pin inside. Now that could have some type of guck or gook in there from the water quality, because again, a lot of these valves are being pumped, water being pumped out of a pond or a lake, a river, and you'll get some silt and stuff clogged in that. So now when we first came out with this, we actually had a spring inside there as well. We took that spring out, so we no longer have that spring inside here. So if there is a spring in there and it's this configuration, take the spring out. You won't need it because that metering pin is based on pressure, and so the spring could cause a problem in there. So we've taken that out. So that is pretty much the 2230. If you have any questions on it, again, you can call me on my cell phone, and or you can go onto our website at www.griswoldcontrols.com, and we have troubleshooting guides on our website under irrigation, so you can go there as well.